There's no music, Jordan. I don't think you're sharing sound. That'll do it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Awesemo.com MLB Strategy Show. Dave Loughran with me, as always, every Wednesday, Adam Scherer. We've got ourselves a 10-gamer to break down today, and we're happy to have everyone with us, as always. Adam, what's going on, brother? We had a wild Game 7 last night. Boston Celtics look like the team to beat in the East. Am I crazy to say that? Like right now, they look like the team to beat. I know you're a Milwaukee guy. Josh is a Milwaukee truther. Boston looks ridiculously good.
Boston looks really, really good. Miami also just scares the shit out of me as a Milwaukee guy.
Yeah, that's true. Miami looks awesome. I know it's an MLB show. You and I are going to talk NBA. I believe we're together today on NBA Live Before Lock as well. So We'll dive into all of that good stuff. But it's definitely been an enjoyable thing to watch. And you're getting some teams that really aren't expected to win coming out and winning. We've got baseball as well, though. And like I said, 10 games to touch on. Some pretty solid pitchers at the top. Max Scherzer against Philly. I think they've lost like 6 or 7 straight to the Phillies. So this is a spot where Max Scherzer are going to need to come out and make things happen. Walker Buehler coming off the 10-day injured list. Pitched 6 one-run frames his last time out with 11 Ks against the Rockies. Dinelson Lamet against the Angels. Zach Wheeler, who's striking nobody out this year. Zach Gallen, Christian Javier. Those are your guys in that 9K and up range. We're going to dive into all of them. But let's kick it off with Tampa Bay and the New York Yankees. Adam, Charlie Morton making his return. He hasn't pitched in a little while. He is also activated from the injured list. His last start was the 9th of August against this very same New York Yankees team. Now, his numbers don't look particularly great because that first start, he got blown up. He wasn't terrible after that, but I have to assume that he's going to be limited in his return from almost a month-long hiatus. The Yankees have a 4.8 implied total, 4.3 for the Rays, plus 109 on the money line. Let's kick it off with Charlie Morton coming back from the injured list.
Yeah, my expectation is that he'll be limited as well. Obviously, he missed about a month, like you said, but also just not having the minor leagues this year. You can throw as many simulated games as you want, but it's not the same as going down and getting a couple rehab starts in before you come back up. So fully expecting him to be limited here. His velocity was down prior to the injury as well. His last 2 starts before he was injured, he was averaging 93 miles an hour on his fastball. Prior to that, it was 92.5, 91.8. So it was trending up a little bit, but still down, pretty significantly from last season when he averaged like 94, 95 miles an hour on his fastball. So that's something to be concerned about. Obviously not looking to roster him, assuming that he is going to be limited, but potential concerns about his effectiveness in general, combined with him probably not going deep into this game, and just the amount of power in the Yankees lineup does kind of make their stacks interesting if they're not getting too much ownership.
On the other side, you've got Jordan Montgomery, pretty solid lefty, not a special pitcher by any stretch, kind of a middle of the rotation guy. He's good, but not going to get you an insane amount of strikeouts. You're not going to get a whole lot of upside out of Montgomery. On the season right now, he's striking batters out at 20%, kind of par for the course, Adam. He doesn't walk a lot of batters. He doesn't strike a ton of batters out. He's got a 12.7% swinging strike rate, though, which isn't bad, and an xFIP sub 4. So, his numbers are good. But the Tampa Bay Rays are also a pretty respectable baseball team. You and I have raved over the way what Cash has done with this team as a general manager, the way they've constructed it with maybe not all of the best players, but still in an uncanny ability to win baseball games. What are we thinking here with the 4.3 implied total for the Rays? Is Jordan Montgomery worth putting any attention towards?
So on a kind of completely side note, you mentioned Cash, made me think of it. This game has the potential to really get ugly too. I'm not sure if you saw highlights from last night, but benches kind of cleared at the end of that game after Chapman threw a pitch 101 miles an hour over Mike Brosseau's head. But after the game,
that's insane. That'll kill somebody.
Did you see Kevin Cash?
Are we certain it was intentional?
No, I mean Cash.
Okay.
Did you see Cash's post game?
I did it. That's why I'm that's why I'm asking you.
he went off in the post game, basically calling out Chapman, calling out the Yankees coaching staff, calling out the umpires for not handling it correctly. He finished it with, he said his quote was, I believe, "The last thing I have to say about it is I have a whole damn stable full of guys that throw 98, period." And and that was okay. So that was how Kevin Cash ended his thoughts on it last night. So this game does have some potential for fireworks. But going back to Montgomery, I think he's a pretty decent pitcher. He has good off-speed pitches, good secondary pitches that they get some swings and misses. Doesn't really put it together in terms of a high strikeout percentage. I do respect the Tampa bats, like you said. I think that it'll be tough to get to him because you just look at the pitchers priced around him, and the two pitchers above him in salary on DraftKings. You have Hauser against Detroit. You have Berrios against the White Sox at sub 8K for probably the first time in like 4 years. And then below him, skipping over Jacob Junis, you have Tristan McKenzie facing Kansas City. So I think there's three arms in good matchups priced right around Montgomery that have more strikeout upside than he does. So I think it'll be tough to roster him.
Now, with that in mind, are there any bats here that you're interested in getting to? Not a particularly high-scoring game, at least not projected to be. 9 over under right now, which in 2020's Major League Baseball is actually pretty low.
Yeah, I mean, both stacks right now are projected to be a little bit under-owned, but neither one projects for a high, top stack percentage. So they look more like kind of like large field tournament plays to me, where obviously the Yankees have enough power in their lineup, and really the Rays do too, where if they're getting 3 to 4% aggregate ownership, there is going to be some appeal getting there. But I don't think either one's in a really high probability spot. We talk about it a lot that bullpen games aren't really that appealing, and obviously Charlie Morton isn't normally someone you want to target against either. Montgomery's a decent enough pitcher. So I think the interest for me is more so in stacks than one-offs, and also more so in large field tournaments than your smaller stuff.
How deep do you think Morton goes into this game? Assuming he's doing all right. Yeah,
I mean, my guess would be something like 4 innings. So like in his last start, he had thrown 50 pitches. Prior to that, he was at 93. That's going back almost a full month. I'm guessing you get something like 50, 60 pitches, 4 innings around there.
All right, let's move on to the Cubs and the Pittsburgh Pirates then. Pirates, just an absolutely dreadful team this season. Kyle Hendricks, Joe Musgrove. We have a bunch of guys being activated off the injured list today, by the way, like 3 or 4 pitchers. Joe Musgrove is the bane of mostly of your existence, but at many points mine is. Seriously, how many times has that guy just bludgeoned us? And the funny thing is, he'll go out and he'll have some decent games. It's just never when we roster him. And he's always cheap enough where you have to at least entertain the notion of playing him. He does, however, in 3 starts this season, have a seriously problematic walk rate, but he's also been striking batters out at a decent clip, 25%, almost 12% swinging strikes. And one thing we know about Musgrove is he's just markedly better against righties than he is against lefties. I know that hasn't been the case this season, but it's a super small sample size. And over the course of his career, we've seen him a lot better, at least from a strikeout perspective, against righties. And then on the other side, Kyle Hendricks. He's the type of pitcher that can go out there and sometimes you'll get a complete game or you'll get 8 shutout innings from him with 4 strikeouts. He has been a little bit better in that respect lately. He does pitch very deep into games, but at his price point, it makes things a little bit prohibitive there. So the Cubs have a 5.6 implied total at PNC Park, pitcher-friendly venue. Pirates 4.1. Cubs are minus 205 on the money line. So big favorites here for Hendricks in Chicago.
Yeah, I don't think I'll be able to get to Musgrove just because it doesn't appear that he's stretched out. He threw a few innings in a simulated game, so I'm not expecting more than like 5 innings from him here. And obviously, it's not a great matchup against Chicago. On the other side, Hendricks by himself does have some appeal because the Pirates are so bad. Hendricks' strikeout numbers have been much better against lefties than righties due to throwing his changeup 40% of the time and getting about an 18.5% swinging strike percentage on it. Pittsburgh probably will have a balanced lineup, probably 5 lefties, 4 righties in it. So a decent spot for Hendricks, and obviously he can pay off that salary. The problem that you're going to run into, though, is just that his strikeout stuff doesn't compare to pitchers that are a little bit more expensive than him. Zach Gallen, obviously a tough matchup against the Dodgers. Lamet, a tough matchup against the Angels. So you do kind of downgrade them a little bit, but there's no question those guys both have a lot better strikeout stuff than Hendricks does. Wheeler every year prior to this season has. Obviously you have Scherzer at the top. So with there being some really legitimate arms at the top of this slate, and then also that kind of high upside mid-range that I mentioned before with Hauser, Berrios, and McKenzie, I think it'll be tough to prioritize Hendricks, but he is at least in the conversation as far as, if his ownership is really low in tournament, someone you can get to, because it is a good matchup. He is a good pitcher. You just kind of have to be on the right side of variance with him actually getting strikeouts.
Do you buy into the fact that his strikeout stuff against lefties is way better than it has been against righties? Because I'm sorry, but I know there a couple arguments you can make is he throws his changeup he's throwing his changeup 37% of the time against lefties this season, his curveball 17% of the time. So he does have the pitches to be able to set down lefties, but that seems like a pretty dramatic split.
I buy into the left-handed numbers being where they're at. I think the right-handed numbers come up.
Yeah.
If you go back and look at previous seasons, in 2018, he struck out 23.5% of lefties, 17% of righties. Last year, he struck out 24% of lefties, 17.3% of righties. This year, he's at 24% of lefties again, but only 13% of righties. So I think you do see an increase in the right-handed numbers to still a below average number, just not as low as it is, and that the left-handed numbers pretty much hold true where they are.
What about hitters here? Talking Cubs, we mentioned already they have an implied total of 5.6. They're even in a spacious, pitcher-friendly venue like PNC Park, the Cubs are expected to kind of lay it on Musgrove in this Pittsburgh bullpen. Where do you stand on them, knowing that pricing is really not that crazy? Rizzo's above 5K, right? Like, speaking specifically to DraftKings for a moment. If Ian Happ leads off, he's 4K. Chris Bryant's 4,400, Baez 4,300, Schwarber 4,100, Contreras 48, Hayward 2.1, Martinez 3.8, Kipnis 2.6. It's actually a really cheap lineup given their total. What do you think of that?
Yeah, my first thought when I looked at it was that I was expecting to look at the lineup and look at the top stack tool and see the Cubs have one of the highest top stack percentages, but the ownership, be up around 20% or something. Right now, it's actually not. We have Chicago with the highest top stack percentage and the third highest ownership, aggregate ownership behind Atlanta and San Diego. If it holds like that, I like getting to the Cubs because 11% aggregate ownership is a lot, but it's not enough where I'm pretty much just fading it regardless in tournaments. And their top stack percentage, again, is the highest on the slate. Musgrove, not a gas can, but will give up home runs. And you do have a lot of very affordable power in this lineup. So I'm really interested to see where the ownership goes. I definitely am going to be paying attention to it because these prices stand out so much. I think that you will get a lot of it, especially because also, like, thinking in terms of a 5-man stack, like, let's say you're trying to get to Scherzer and another, good pitcher, you're going to have a $2,100 Hayward or a $2,600 Kipnis that you can throw into your stack to basically just offset how it's, any sort of expense there. So I think you see a lot of ownership. It's just a matter of how high does it get. The way we have it projected right now, I would still like the Cubs.
All right. Any interest here in Pittsburgh? My assumption would be that you don't.
Your assumption's correct. I do think 3K Adam Frazier looks really good. I think as a one-off, a $3,300 Josh Bell is fine because of the power upside, but typically not in the habit of picking on Kyle Hendricks.
Okay. We'll move it on then. Philadelphia, Washington. Phillies running Zach Wheeler out there today. He has been, Zach Wheeler in terms of being able to limit and prevent runs has been spectacular. On the other hand, he has offered pretty much nothing in the form of strikeouts. Single-digit swinging strike rate. His strikeout rate is 15.3%. 5 strikeouts per 9. Really not good stuff. Lefties and righties both striking them out below 17%. He's done a good job of walking nobody. He's prevented home runs, Adam. There are a lot of great things he's done. If you're the Phillies or if you're Joe Girardi, you're saying, all right, cool, just keep running out there and not giving up runs, not giving up home runs. But from a DFS standpoint, this price to me seems outrageously high unless we start to see him unless we see those strikeout numbers stabilize. But the problem is strikeouts usually stabilize pretty quickly, and it hasn't happened with Zach Wheeler. Maybe it has something to do with some of the matchups he's gotten, but all in all, that's a really, really startlingly low K rate for Wheeler, who's usually at least significantly better than that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to be concerned about. You mentioned the matchups; they really haven't been that bad.
I don't know either.
Yeah, I don't know what the lineups were, but he faced Atlanta twice, and typically this year Atlanta's had plenty of strikeouts in their lineup. He's faced Baltimore, he's faced Miami, he's faced the Yankees, faced the Mets. Like there's plenty of strikeouts to be had there. The other thing is if you look at what he's throwing this year and compare it to last year, it is a little bit concerning. When last year he was throwing his force to right-handed hitters. He was throwing his four-seam fastball 32%. He was throwing his sinker 29%. He gets more swinging strikes on his four-seam fastball, as you would expect, and he was throwing his slider about 25%. This year, he's increased his sinker usage to 45%, cut back his four-seam usage to 20%. So last year he threw about 60% fastballs combined. This year he's at 65%, but a much larger percentage of that is his sinker that does not get any swings and misses, as opposed to his four-seam fastball. And then he's cut his slider usage back from 25% to about 19%. So I do think that it's concerning, what he's doing there from a pitch mix standpoint. I still don't think that, if he were to pitch this way for an entire season, his strikeout percentage wouldn't be as low as it is right now, I don't think. But it does concern me a little bit. But like you said, the salary being where it is, it's kind of interesting because like if Zach Wheeler starts being 8,200 or something, you're just going to roster Zach Wheeler every slate based on his career numbers. But at 9,500, it's kind of not a spot that I like all that much. The one argument that you can make, I guess, is that the pitchers at the top, with the exception of Scherzer, don't really have good matchups for strikeouts. Like it's a tough spot for Lamet. It's a tough spot for Gallen. So, maybe if those guys are still getting a lot of ownership, you pivot to Wheeler. But I still think he's a little more expensive than he should be given the strikeout numbers this year.
So Scherzer right now getting quite a bit of ownership. Shouldn't be a surprise. You just pointed out, like there aren't that many guys in favorable spots at the top. But this Phillies offense has been very good. And early in the season, you had guys like McCutchen and Rhys Hoskins that were completely lost. They've turned things around in a big way. You have Bryce Harper. You have one of the best hitting catchers, arguably the best hitting catcher in the league, in JT Realmuto. I don't know. Tell me where you're at on this matchup, whether it's, all right, the matchup concerns me. This is a really good, I don't think there's any disputing right now that this team can hit really well. But is it that, but hey, his price is reasonable. He's still got wicked strikeout stuff and I've got to look there. Or is there an argument to say, well, the Philadelphia Phillies against righties this season are top 10 in pretty much every category, WOBA, ISO, WRC plus, and have the lowest strikeout rate in the league at 19.4%. I got to put all that on the table before we get there.
Yeah, I think the salary for Scherzer keeps him firmly in play just because you're not overpaying. I mean, it's a pitcher with great strikeout stuff. And like we said, pretty much all the guys at the top are in subpar strikeout matchups. The thing that I think, and Scherzer also not getting a crazy amount of ownership. Like we haven't projected to be the highest owned pitcher on the slate, but only at 38%. So it's not like this is one of those slates, at least right now, where we're projecting 60% ownership to go to Scherzer. All that being said, I think that there's a really good chance I end up kind of just avoiding this pricing tier because I'm going to want to get to that Berrios, McKenzie, those guys in the middle. So I think that'll keep my exposure to Scherzer at least somewhat in check. But I do think that at 10-4, he's just a little cheaper than he should be for his ceiling.
I do too. He is, but if he's going to come in around like 40-45% ownership, I think there's reason for me to potentially back away from that a little bit. And I'm not saying that's crazy ownership on a 2-game slate, on a 2-pitcher slate and a 10-game slate. It's not, but yeah, I don't like the fact that the Phillies have the lowest strikeout rate in the league against righties, Adam. Like that, I know he can strike anybody out. Totally understand that. And they've got a lot of righties in this lineup too. So that works in his favor, but really not striking out at all this year.
Yeah, I really think for me, it's just going to come down to there's not a good option that's really cheap on this slate. And so just thinking about it in terms of pitcher pairs, you're probably going to you might like your lineups more if you're saving like 2,500, basically going Barrios McKenzie over Scherzer McKenzie. Granted, with some of the batter pricing, it probably won't be that much of an issue. But I'm still giving the edge to Scherzer here just because of how good he is. But also, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, the Phillies have a 4.2 implied run total, which obviously isn't high. But
I didn't mention that, but I'm glad you did. Yeah.
But for when you think about it relative to where teams are normally at in Max Scherzer starts, it's pretty high.
I would say so, yeah. But I'm not that surprised by it. Like it's a good pitcher against a very good offense. Sorry, right. An elite pitcher against a very good offense. So, last year we probably would have seen it at 3.2 or something like this. Right. It's a big difference. There's no doubt about it.
One other thing to point out, because I just pulled it up, but Zach Wheeler's projected for 2.5% ownership on DraftKings right now. I mentioned it when I talked about him, but if that's going to be the case, like I can have serious concerns about Wheeler and still think that he should be higher than 2% owned on the slate.
That's fair, yeah. Nationals third lowest K rate against righties, but if it's going to be that low, a good pitcher who is preventing runs, and as you said earlier, there should be some type of positive regression here in terms of strikeouts, because is his pitch mix a little bit different? Yeah, but Zach Wheeler's still a good pitcher. He still should be able to produce better than he has in that department, but I guess we will find out. Do you have any thoughts on hitters here?
I think the Phillies are kind of interesting. There's enough good pitching on this slate where there's not that many offenses that jump out as being, really, really high probability spots. There's a few, but if you're, kind of talked about all the concerns for Scherzer, and if he's going to be the most popular pitcher on the slate, you do have a favorable park for hitting. I don't mind taking the shots at Phillies, especially, large field tournaments. Like in 3-max type stuff, you probably don't need to go there. But in larger field stuff, you're leveraging against, 40% of the field, and you're getting a high upside offense. Right now we have the Phillies with the 4th lowest top stack percentage at 2%, but a sub 1% aggregate ownership share, which is tied with the White Sox for the lowest on the slate.
It's pretty wild that DraftKings priced Harper at 5,900 in this matchup.
Yeah, that'll keep his ownership at non-existent.
Yeah, probably like 0.
Right, but you can balance it out with Jay Bruce, who's 2,500. Yeah,
there's a few guys that are really cheap for sure.
Yeah, Roman Quinn's the minimal.
I wonder what Harper's ownership's coming in at right now. It's got to be super low. It's got to be like nothing, less than 1% maybe. Nah, I'll give him 3. Let's see. I'll give him 2.5. 0.3. 0.3. All right, I got the 3. Let's move it on to Boston and Atlanta then. Hey, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. I shouldn't have to repeat myself, but I will. It helps us out a ton. And your guys' support keeps us being able to do this, to keep getting eyes on the show, grow it, and do it for free. So hit that thumbs up, subscribe, hit the notification bell as well, so you always know when new content's coming up next. We got football coming up real shortly, baseball, basketball, golf, UFC, everything here at youtube.com/Awesemo. Let's go to Atlanta, or go to Boston Fenway Park, where they're hosting the Atlanta Braves today. Robbie Erlin, and then you've got Mike Kickham. So I don't know a ton about Mike Kickham outside of the fact that his contract was selected by the Red Sox on Monday. And, well, he's pitching in, I think, the bigs for the first time since 2014. Reading this straight off the player page, Adam. So as of now, the total in this game runs for the implied run total for the Atlanta Braves is 6. 5.1 for the Boston Red Sox. This does not feel like a spot where we should be terribly enthusiastic about getting to pitchers. And the Atlanta Braves against Kickham have the 2nd highest projected aggregate ownership as a team. Boston is even up there in the top 7 or 8 as well, despite their struggles this season. So again, it's projecting to be an offensive game for sure.
Yeah, it is. And Kickham, like you said, he's 31. He's been around, not really in the majors, through 28 innings in 2013 with the Giants, 2 innings in 2014 with the Giants, hasn't been in the majors since then. Was at AAA with the Marlins last year, 31 appearances, 13 starts, 86 innings pitched, struck out 8.8 per 9 innings, 21.9% strikeout percentage. Steamer projects him for 8.16 strikeouts per 9, which for a minimum price pitcher actually isn't bad. But I have concerns about how deep he goes into the game. I don't really have any way of gauging that. And it's not like it's a good matchup against Atlanta. I doubt that I get there. It would be more appealing if this were a slate where you had, Scherzer at 12K facing the, Pirates or something, and you really wanted to get there. But I just don't really see myself going that route roster construction wise.
Okay. So what then are you doing specifically with this game? Is there anything on either side of this game that you envision yourself having a lot of?
The bats, all of them. Like kick them, I don't expect to be any good. The Braves obviously have a lot of right-handed power with Ozuna. D'Arnaud will be a really good catcher option. Riley, Duvall, Swanson. These guys, all have power from the right side. Freeman's just a good hitter in general. So the Braves, with a 6 implied run total, obviously you're going to get a lot of ownership, but I think deservedly so. They're also very affordably priced, so that will drive down that Cubs ownership that we were talking about before. It explains why the Cubs ownership isn't higher than it is. On the other side, Robbie Erlin facing potentially JD Martinez, Xander Bogaerts, Michael Chavis. Like, there's right-handed power in this lineup too, not nearly as much as there is in the Atlanta lineup, not nearly as much as there has been in the past for Boston. So I do like the Braves more than I like the Red Sox. But I do think they both look like pretty good options. They're both right now coming in a little bit over-owned relative to top stack percentage, but nothing too crazy for either one.
Favorite bats from this one right now as it stands?
Marcell Ozuna at 4,300 on DraftKings. D'Arnaud, because of his position, I think looks really good. And Austin Riley at 3,600. There's just too much power there for that. Also, okay. Adam Duvall at 3,100. The Braves are really affordably priced.
Yeah, they are. I was surprised by that quite a bit, as a matter of fact. Robbie Erlin, it's crazy too. He's striking righties out at 29%, but he's given up a ton of power to them. 313 ISO this season. So I know you touched a lot on Atlanta and a bit on Boston, but the Boston Red Sox are going to have a slew of right-handed hitters in the middle of that order, from Martinez to, assuming he's in the lineup, to Bogaerts, to Vasquez, to Chavis. They've got a lot of righties there. I know you like Atlanta a lot, but just to be sure here, because this is going to be one of those games that has a decent amount of ownership. Right now with the 5% aggregate ownership for this Boston stack, do they appeal to you at that ownership? Does that make them one of your preferred teams, even if they're not close to Atlanta?
Yeah, I mean, I like them. I think that their ownership right now is coming in about where it should. The problem is just that beyond Martinez and Bogaerts, there's nothing that I really feel good about. It's you're basically counting on Robbie Erlin not being good, which, you mentioned the power numbers to righties this year. If you go back to last year, it holds. He has a 202 ISO to righties since the start of last season. There's definite power upside here. It's just that Christian Vasquez is fine, but Michael Chavis, Bobby Dahlbeck, who made his debut a couple of days ago, they're just not. They don't have the same track record as a lot of these guys, on Atlanta or on Chicago, and they're clearly not as good in offense. That is reflected in the ownership, though. So I think they're coming in about where they should be.
Okay, and given their performance this season, they're kind of expensive. Vasquez and Martinez have been not really that good this year at all. Devers has been okay. They're all 5K plus. Vasquez is 4,500. That's a lot for this team, even in this matchup. So I think that could be one of the reasons that you see ownership down a little bit. Let's talk about Milwaukee and Detroit. Halfway through it here almost. Milwaukee running out Adrian Hauser, Spencer Turnbull for the Detroit Tigers. I guess we can start with Hauser here. He's okay. So if you're talking from a strikeout perspective alone, Hauser's had a tough time striking lefties out, a really tough time. Less than 10.8% strikeouts. He has a 1.2% K minus BB rate. Not good. 28% strikeouts against righties. He's not getting a ton of swinging strikes. Called plus swinging strike is 27%. That's a very low number. And the total here, looking at this between two guys that are kind of susceptible to getting beat up, but more so Turnbull, 5.1 for Milwaukee, 4 runs for Detroit is is Hauser's price is crazy. If he was probably 6K, 6,500, I think there'd be a decent amount of interest in him. But at 8,500, that seems pretty restrictive given what we've seen from him this year. But I guess I'll ask you this. What if Detroit does run out a bunch of righties? I think you're probably going to see, six of them, 6 righties in the lineup. Hauser's still too expensive for you, right?
I have some interest in Hauser just because, for one, I don't buy into Detroit being as good an offense as they have for this season so far. I do think there should be a lot of strikeouts in this lineup. It is dependent, like you said, on kind of how the lineup looks. But also, I don't want to get caught up too much in Hauser's strikeout numbers this year. He's only thrown a total of 290 pitches to lefties. Last year, he struck out about 25.8% of lefties. He is throwing his sinker more this year to lefties than he did last year, which is never something you want to see. But, I don't think his strikeout numbers hold this low going forward. So I'm still kind of interested there. And then obviously the strikeout numbers against righties, like you said, have been great this year. They were really good last year too. So some interest in Hauser. He's coming in at about 17% owned right now. I think that seems, pretty fair. I think biggest thing is that Berrios is clearly a better pitcher than Hauser is. We talk about Berrios' flaws a lot, but he shouldn't be $600 less expensive than Adrian Hauser. So that makes it, kind of tough. But I do think that, especially if the lineup is balanced or predominantly right-handed, it is a good spot for Hauser.
What are we doing with the Milwaukee bats here? 5+ implied total against Spencer Turnbull, who it's been really a tough time not walking. He's walking 15% of righties this season. His walk rate's through the roof, man. Overall, he's striking out 20% of batters, I think it is, and walking 14% of batters. He's given up a fair amount of runs. On the home run front, though, Spencer Turnbull has done a good job of preventing them. I think he's pitched he's pitched 30 innings. He hasn't allowed a home run yet. So he's had a couple ugly starts, given that he's only thrown a few innings in those games, given up 3 runs and 4, 3 runs and 2. But he's overall been satisfactory in run prevention. The problem is he's not a particularly great pitcher, and I don't know how deep he goes. He did throw 80 or 97 pitches last time out. But again, I'll come back to this. He's almost $9,000 on DraftKings. I saw. Normally, I wouldn't even spend this much time talking about him, but Milwaukee has been a team that's striking out a ton against righties this season. Let me just make sure it's still Milwaukee on the year is striking out at the second highest clip against righties, right behind their opponent today, the Detroit Tigers. They have a 73 WRC plus against righties. They've been really bad against right-handed pitching. So putting all of that together, what are your thoughts on Turnbull and how does that align with that Vegas total we're seeing from Milwaukee?
Yeah, the price is really the issue for me because you do get those strikeouts from Milwaukee, like you said, but Turnbull has always had better strikeout stuff against righties than lefties, as you would expect. And Milwaukee most likely will have at least 5 lefties in this lineup. But also, you have Turnbull at the same price as Kyle Hendricks, who's facing Pittsburgh. Like, there is a big ownership gap, but I would rather go to Hendricks. You have Christian Javier, who's not that much more expensive than Turnbull. You have Hauser and, more importantly, Berrios, who are less expensive. So it will drive his ownership down. And if you're looking for, a 2% play, then fine. But I think that there's going to be easier ways to differentiate your lineup than hoping Turnbull beats that whole group of pitchers. I guess one positive thing for Turnbull is that he has done a good job of limiting power. Going back to last year, a 132 ISO allowed to lefties, 140 to righties. Obviously, both of those numbers look good. And so it does at least somewhat contain interest in Milwaukee. The Brewers are really cheap, with the exception of Yelich and Keston Hiura. Justin Smoke, obviously Al Garcia, Luis Urias probably leading off, Omar Narvaez. Like, these guys are all really inexpensive, but that's the case for a lot of teams today. And I think that there's some better matchups than Turnbull.
Okay. I guess I am a little bit interested in Turnbull. Some of that is going to depend on what ownership looks like, but here's how I see it, right? If Hauser, if you mentioned Hendricks, understandable for sure. Hauser's getting 17% too. Hendricks is getting 17%. Turnbull's getting 1.7% ownership right now. I understand that there are some concerns with Spencer Turnbull, but when he hasn't had any limitations like that one start where he left early against the White Sox, he's actually been pretty good, Adam. Like I don't know. I guess there's a couple things to consider here. The first one, obviously, being the Milwaukee has just not been very good, and they should improve. And the Turnbull's not striking out a ton of batters. He's got a 20% K rate on the season. I don't know. It just seems like a pretty good matchup, and I might get to some Spencer Turnbull today if his ownership stays below 2%, while all of these other guys in the similar price range end up getting close to 20. So, what about the rest of this game? Bats interest you on either side?
To some extent, not really the Detroit side. Obviously, if you can get the Yelich, that's fine. But Turnbull does do a pretty good job of limiting power, like I said. So really all that, the biggest appeal to me is just the Milwaukee bats, because as a stack, they're pretty inexpensive and they do have a lot of power. I just don't think it's a spot that they come through all that often.
All right. Let's talk about Cleveland. Easy for me to say. And Kansas City, Jake Junis, Tristan McKenzie. He's made a couple of appearances this year, 4 innings, 6 innings. He did strike out 10 against Detroit in one game, which I guess is worth mentioning, going up against the Kansas City team today that doesn't really threaten much whatsoever, although they're also not going to strike out at an insane clip either. I guess they have a higher K rate than I would have anticipated, sub 100 WRC plus. What are your thoughts on the bats here? Right now, Royals 4-run implied total, 5.1 implied total for the Cleveland Indians. Let's start. Let's actually kick this off with Tristan McKenzie, 6,700 on DraftKings.
I think he looks like one of the better values on the slate. We only have him projected for 19% ownership right now, which surprises me. I think that might come up throughout the day because, obviously a low implied run total for Kansas City. Like it's even lower than the Phillies against Scherzer, but also just a really cheap price point for one of Cleveland's top pitching prospects. He obviously was amazing his first start, struggled his second start, but overall, struck out 24% of hitters at Double-A last year. Projects by Steamer for an 8.75 strikeouts per 9. Just a pretty solid pitcher, and he's inexpensive against a mediocre Kansas City lineup. I think that he looks like a really good option, and if the ownership doesn't skyrocket between now and lock, I expect to have a lot of him.
I would think so too. It's a pretty appealing spot. He's priced nicely. When you have a lot of these other pitchers that are maybe priced up a little bit too much, I'd say you have some inflated pricing on a bunch of these guys. Not that they're entirely impossible to get to, but I definitely think someone like McKenzie should probably be around 7,500 or so, and he's not. So I like that. He showed earlier in the year that he's very capable of putting up, decent strikeout totals. It's a small sample for sure, and we don't really have a ton to go off of, so I don't really want to dive too much into that. But if you're talking about his minor league stuff, do you think that he can translate, Adam, pretty decent numbers coming into this season, coming into the major league level? Because at Double-A he struck out a ton. Single A and A+. Last year at Double-A, or 2 years ago, at Double-A, he threw 90 innings and struck out like 24% of batters, less than a batter per inning, but 24%. And I guess I don't know where to put him. It might not matter on a day like today where he's only 6,700 though.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing is the salary. And I think that, he's young. He just turned 23. So the numbers he was putting up in the minors, in 2018, he would have been, I guess, 21 at Double-A. Or I guess for most of the season, he would have been 20, right? Whatever. Yeah. But yeah, so, whatever. He's young for the level. He's still putting up good numbers. He's one of Cleveland's top prospects. Like the pedigree's there. I think that he should be good. I don't expect him to just come up and dominate the major leagues immediately, but the upside at least is there. The stuff looks pretty good, averaging about 94 miles an hour on his fastball through his first 2 starts. So yeah, as long as the salary is where it's at, I'm going to roster him because, even if you assume that right now he's like an average pitcher, it's pretty easy, and especially in good matchups, to expect him to get you, 13, 14 points. And at his salary, that's a pretty good result. And then he obviously has the upside for more.
How about the other side? Jake Junis against Cleveland, 5.1 implied total for the Indians. Junis has not been terrible on the home run ball this season. It's been a long-standing problem for him, but he has not been pitching deep into games. He hasn't gone 5 innings in a single start this year. He did allow multiple home runs in one spot, but aside from that, I don't really know how much you get out of him. The biggest question here is what are we doing with the Cleveland Indian bats, who right now are projected to get quite a bit of ownership, top 4 aggregate ownership on the Cleveland Indians right now, just below 10% on our top stack tool over at Awesemo.com.
Yeah, DraftKings really mailed it in with the hitter pricing today. The bottom 4 hitters in the Kansas City lineup are $2,500 or less, in the Cleveland lineup are $2,500 or less. Josh Naylor for $2K is a pretty solid value, assuming he's in the lineup after they picked him up from San Diego. So just another team in a good spot against Junis, a guy who doesn't strike out a lot of hitters, who has historically had problems with home runs. Like you said, it's been a little bit better this year, but tons of power in the Cleveland lineup, and as a stack, essentially free. Jose Ramirez, 4,900, Lindor, 5K, the only 2 hitters in this lineup that are remotely expensive. So just another team you can get to really, really easily. I guess the ownership should be in check, just because every team on this slate you can pretty much stack for free. But right now we do have them with the 4th highest aggregate ownership. We have them with the 4th highest top stack percentage. So I'll be keeping an eye on the ownership there, see if it starts to skew towards any 1 or 2 teams in particular. But I think it is a good spot for Cleveland. I think there's very favorable pricing on them as well.
Our ownership rankings for NBA are completely free today. So are our MLB ownership projections for baseball. If you haven't checked them out, and you hear us discussing them all the time, ownership projections for baseball are free today at Awesemo.com. Our PGA player rankings are free today. We want to give you guys an idea of what we have to offer here, and so are the NHL player projections. So check all of that out at Awesemo.com. If you haven't signed up, if you're not a premium member yet, well, easiest way to do it is go to Awesemo.com/join and check out all of the subscription offerings we have, from the all access monthly, from golf to baseball to basketball, football coming up just around the corner, MMA, NASCAR. If they have contests for it on DraftKings, on FanDuel, you name it, on Yahoo, we've got you covered. We've got premium content, free content for everything. But behind the paywall, you're talking about the ownership projections and the player projections, both of which, the top stack tool as well, the boomer bust tool for basketball. We got a lot of awesome stuff for NFL that we haven't released yet, so stay tuned for that. All of it developed, created by Alex Baker himself, by Awesemo, the number 1 ranked DFS player in the world. He doesn't just put his name on it. We don't just slap his name on it. He uses them to win money, more money than anybody I know playing DFS. That's why he's ranked number 1. And these are the same tools that you have access to when you join us at Awesemo.com. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. You can hit me up on Twitter at Laffy_D. You got to follow me there. You got to show some respect, Follow Adam at ShipMyMoneyDFS. He won't answer your questions, but he'll certainly entertain you. No, he'll answer questions. I'm just kidding. But yeah, so head over to Awesemo.com/join. If you want to scroll to the bottom of the page as well, you can see the small tutorial videos on all of our best, most popular tools, from the lineup builder to ownership to projections to so much more. So head over there, Awesemo.com/join. We have weekly, monthly, express weekly if you're running on a budget. We have the annual if you want to just cut a ton of money off the top and set yourself up for the next calendar year for all of our sports. And we have the Fantasy Cruncher add-on. Check it out, Awesemo.com/join. And when you do, head over and join our premium Slack chat. It comes with the subscription. People talking DFS sports all day, all night. Today, Adam, that his price has come down every time. Barrios is at a price point where you're kind of scratching your head. It appears that DraftKings has begun to correct that. Little course correction here. 8,200 last time against Cleveland. Now against a good White Sox offense, he's 7,900. Normally, I wouldn't even ask you about him in a spot like this, but because he does have actually a 25% K rate this year, which is one of his better marks, 12% swinging strike rate, and pretty much struggled at times to prevent runs, but he's playing in a division that's got quite a bit of pop scattered throughout it. And he said, a couple of ugly matchups like the White Sox earlier in the year, Cleveland last time out, and he's struggled in some easy ones as well. But $7,900 Jose Berrios. Is there any interest there with his ownership coming in at, you ready for this? 30% today on DraftKings.
Did you know he's still only 26?
I didn't, but I'm not terribly surprised. Why? Is he one of those guys where you envision him being in the league for a long time, but he wasn't?
I thought he was like 29 or 30 by now.
He's been in the league for what? 4 or 5 years? 4 years? Like
he was drafted in 2012. He's been in the league, since 2016.
Okay. Yeah, so 26, if he was drafted in 12, I guess that's pretty young.
Yeah. I thought he'd been in the league since like 2014 or something. But yeah, I mean, I think this is a really interesting spot just from there's huge upside on both sides here. Berrios, like you said, he has about a 25% strikeout percentage. When he's on, he's very, very difficult to hit. He has really good stuff. It's just that he is kind of hit or miss. And, you mentioned that normally he's priced up. I feel like for the last 4 years, I've been able to not even know who he's facing and just say he's too expensive on DraftKings. Like
$10K every time. Yeah.
Right. And it's normally like he has a 25% strikeout percentage and he's priced around 6 guys that have a 30% strikeout percentage. Now that's not the case. He's obviously discounted 1 for his actual numbers and 2 for the matchup here against the White Sox. And it is a tough matchup. There's a ton of risk, but at the same time, he's really cheap for his skill set. So I do think he projects as a good play. I think that you'll obviously want to be contrarian with your stacks if you're going to Berrios because he is getting ownership. But yeah, I have no issue getting there. The spot that really stands out, though, is that right now the White Sox are tied with the Phillies for the lowest aggregate ownership on the slate, and they're facing a hit or miss pitcher in Berrios that's getting a lot of ownership. So if you're looking for a leverage stack or to get leverage on the field or just a high upside, low on spot, I think the White Sox fit the bill.
The White Sox are 20th tied for last in aggregate ownership, as you just pointed out. But they're middle of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They're 10th in top stack probability. So, there's
and I feel really confident that their ownership as a stack will be low because sometimes you see like these leverage spots end up getting some steam and getting more ownership because people are like, oh, well, I'll just stack against the popular pitcher. But we've talked about how cheap so many stacks are on this slate. Not the case for the White Sox here against Berrios, where Tim Anderson is 5,400, Yohan Moncada is 5,300, Grandal at 4,700, Abreu at 5,200. This is an expensive stack, and you're going to have to pay for them against a good pitcher. I'm pretty confident the ownership will stay really low. And obviously, if you're going to the White Sox, that's what you're looking for.
All right. So, moving on to the other side, Ronaldo Lopez. Good old Ronaldo Lopez, Adam. It is not a hefty sample from him whatsoever this year, but we do have a pretty good idea of what you're going to get from Ronaldo Lopez on most cases. He's a pretty enigmatic pitcher too, because there have been times where Ronaldo Lopez has legitimately won people tournaments. I could point to several starts last year where he goes off and just rips off a ton of strikeouts and then gets absolutely blasted the next time out. His strikeout stuff isn't good. It's pretty much league average. League average used to be around 20, 21%. I'm assuming it's up a little bit now just as power number averages are up. But his strikeout rate, 20.9 last year. This year in limited opportunity, it's 20%. That might not serve him particularly well, though, coming into this matchup against a good Minnesota team, especially with a pretty low ground ball rate, something that has always been the case for Lopez. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, it's funny because if you go back a couple of years, there's articles about that Adam Eaton trade where it's like Ronaldo Lopez is here to stay. Now the White Sox just need Lucas Giolito to put it together. Yeah. And, it'll be a good return. And then now you have Lopez who can barely stay in a rotation. Dunning looks good and Giolito obviously is great. So pretty crazy how things have changed and Lopez has just fallen off. The underlying skills are obviously still there. The stuff is good. He just struggles to put it together. And, if you go back to last season, struck out 23% of righties, 19% of lefties, gives up a lot of power though. 205 ISO to lefties, 226 to righties. And now you get this Minnesota lineup that, has plenty of it. Josh Donaldson questionable for tonight. If he's in the lineup, he's only 3,200 on DraftKings. But, you have Kepler, you have Polanco, Cruz, Rosario, Sano. There's so much power in this lineup, and it's a really scary spot for Lopez. So right now, the Twins actually not getting that much ownership. They're the sixth highest top stack percentage, the sixth or seventh highest ownership percentage. So, pretty much coming in around where they should be. But I think that when you just think about it and think about the ownership in terms of raw numbers and not ranks like that, they're getting less than half the ownership of the Cubs, the Braves, the Padres, basically a little over half of the Indians. For a team with this kind of power in a spot against Lopez that can get ugly for him really quickly, I think that they should be getting more ownership than they are.
You would think so. 5.4 run implied total in a pretty neutral venue at Target Field. I agree. Nelson Cruz is exorbitantly priced, but outside of him, there's not anyone that's that expensive, Adam. And that's what kind of, to expand upon what you were saying, that's what's kind of surprising to me. Outside of Cruz, is anybody that egregiously priced on this team?
No, not in terms of being expensive at all.
That's what I mean. Are there anybody egregiously overpriced?
Right. Yeah, I would say Donaldson's egregiously underpriced. But yeah, I think that they're expensive enough that that's probably what's driving their ownership down, is that if you're going to the Twins that you really want, you don't have any of those like 2K free plays like you have with the Indians or the Cubs. So that probably is keeping the ownership in check, but it's not that big of a deal because there's good mid-range pitching on this slate. There's plenty of value from other teams that you can use to round out your lineup. Like, it's still going to be easy to stack the Twins, even with Cruz, I think.
So 3 to go here. We move on to Texas and Houston. You've got Christian Javier and Colby Allard. I guess we can start on the Houston side, or the Houston side of this one, at home in the Battle of Texas. 5.3 run for Houston, but a 3.9 run implied total for the Texas Rangers. Christian Javier, the young righty, on the bump for Houston. If you're talking about the Rangers here, they've been pretty disastrous offense this season against right-handers. They've got a 69 WRC plus, a 135 ISO, and a 287 WOBA. These are all just really, really bad numbers. Their what WRC plus is better than only the Pittsburgh Pirates. That's how bad we're talking here with how they've performed this season. Their WOBA is better than only the Pirates. There aren't really any teams that have been worse than them outside of Pittsburgh, and that includes weighted on base average. They aren't striking out a ton against righties. I think they're actually in the bottom half of the league in that category, but they're still just so bad offensively, and it's hard for me to see a significant turnaround more than halfway through this abbreviated season. So I'll turn it over to you and ask exactly what you plan on doing with the guy in Javier, who's striking out a good amount of batters, but isn't getting a ton of missed bats, and is also, to be very clear about this, has definitely had a bit of a home run problem as well, allowing 7 home runs now in 31 innings pitched. Kind of a mixed bag with Christian Javier, especially given his splits against righties and lefties in the strikeout department.
Yeah, he also has a walk problem, but there's no real doubting the upside. He's young, but in about 86 innings at AA last year, struck out like 36%. He's striking out 25% so far in the majors. And the pitchers against the Rangers have really kind of just been plug and play this year, and you've been fine. Like even it seems like the pitcher just always gets there. Like even last night, you had Framber Valdez start out really poorly, give up runs in the first inning, and start out negative, and then just finishes at 20 points because that's what pitchers do against the Rangers.
Yeah.
So, I think that there's obviously risk in going to him because he's young. He's not proven in the majors. He walks a ton of guys. He'll give up power. Like you said, it can get ugly for him really quickly. And he's expensive enough where there's not a really big margin of error. But it's like this team has just been so bad. And I keep waiting for them to turn it around because if you go hitter by hitter through this lineup, they shouldn't be good, but they shouldn't be nearly as bad as they are. But it's just not happening. And the upside remains there because, like, you look at the hitters that do have some power. Joey Gallo strikes out a ton. Shin-Soo Choo strikes out. Now they recalled Ronald Guzman, who's another really high strikeout guy, but that has some power. So there's guys that you can strike out multiple times going through this order, and he certainly has the ability to do that. I think that, you mentioned the difference in strikeout numbers so far between righties and lefties, 16.4% to lefties, 37% to righties. So it is somewhat concerning that, Chu and Gallo and Dietrich and Guzman all are left-handed. Those are the hitters that you're most concerned about in the lineup anyway, and they all have the platoon advantage. So I think it's like I'm pumping the brakes on my optimism a little bit, because, I think maybe some people are just going to look at this and say, yeah, this guy strikes guys out. He's facing the Rangers. Let's go. I think that it's pretty easy to see how this goes poorly. But that being said, it's still, I think, one of the better spots on the slate when you consider who he's facing and just the strikeout stuff that he has.
I'm not going to disagree with you. I will say, though, that I have quite a bit of interest in Joey Gallo here, getting 3.7% ownership right now. Javier against lefties this year has a 7.2% swinging strike rate and a 385 xWOBA and a 298 x ISO. These aren't exactly great numbers. He's not getting a ton of strikeouts. He's coughed up 5 home runs to lefties already this season, 2.93 home runs per 9 and a 5.78 xFIP. So I think when you're looking at ownership on somebody like Javier, he is getting some attention. He's north of 20% projected ownership right now, and Joey Gallo is getting nothing at all. If that stands, and you kind of alluded to this, just talking about how things could go poorly. I'm not saying I'm loading up on Texas stacks, Adam, but there are ways here for the occasional or the random power bat in this lineup, specifically Gallo, to come out and have a pretty solid game.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And there's Gallo, whose price is fine, but you also have a really inexpensive Dietrich. You have basically minimum salary Ronald Guzman. Shin-Soo Choo is $2,800. Like, these guys should not be this cheap, and they clearly can have success here. Like, when you talk about those hitters individually, particularly Choo and Gallo, they're proven well above average major league hitters against a pitcher who is not proven in the majors and so far has really struggled against lefties. I think they're both really good plays. I think Dietrich is a good play as well. I think probably more of a boom or bust spot for both sides than people are going to give it credit for.
Andrew says, Laffy, which stack do I take today to score 23 runs and still only win $40? Yeah, I did.
So I played 3 MLB lineups last night. I stacked the Indians, the Indians, the Braves, and the Giants. The lineup that did not cash was my Giants stack.
That's insane.
That's 23 runs.
I can't remember the last time I've seen a team have 5 or 6 guys with 3+ hits. And I think Dickerson had 16 or 17 total bases.
He had 16. He tied Willie Mays for the Giants record.
Crazy.
His double, because he had 3 home runs and then he doubled. His double went 414 feet and would have been a home run in every ballpark other than Coors.
That's crazy. This is, how many times have you and I said this? That Coors Field, people think it's the most homer-friendly park in the league. It's not.
Yeah.
It's cavernous, it's spacious, and it's hard to cover all of that distance, but it's also in altitude where you can hit more home runs. There weren't that many home runs for those amount of runs scored yesterday in that game.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. People just assume that because of all the runs scored there, it's because home runs are something to hit. It's because the outfield is so freaking big that everything that you put out there falls in.
Exactly. I was live betting that game, and it's 12:30, and I hop on the over, and I'm betting over 27.5. It's so crazy. This can't be right. And it hit, by the way.
The Giants almost scored more runs than the Nuggets did points in the second half.
It was a football score outside of the 5. It was a football score. It was nuts. But yeah, betting over 27.5 is just the craziest thing, man. Let's talk about the other side of this one. Houston against Colby Allard. What are you doing with Houston bats here? 5.3 run total here against Allard.
I really like them, especially with the ownership that they're getting right now. We have them coming in kind of middle of the pack in ownership, less ownership than the Twins, than the Brewers, than the Red Sox. But with the fifth highest top stack percentage on the slate, Colby Allard has really not been good this year. Former prospect with the Braves, went over to Texas last year, coming off of a decent start his last time out against Oakland, but overall has been disappointing. And I don't think he's as bad as he has been so far, but he is still young, he is still unproven. And so far, going back to last season, 17% strikeout percentage to righties, only a 113 ISO, which obviously is really, really good and would be a concern. But when you're talking about Springer, Altuve, Correa, Gurriel, like these guys have power from the right side. Kyle Tucker is just a good hitter, good young hitter with power and speed. Michael Brantley's really cheap. I think that, obviously Bregman being out does take some appeal away from the stack for Houston, but there's still plenty of power upside to get to here. They're not particularly expensive. Gurriel and Altuve are both 5K. Everyone else is less, and they're not getting a ton of ownership here. So, I agree that they're not as high a probability play as some of these other teams like Atlanta, but I still think the upside is just as high.
Okay, I don't have any arguments there, especially given that 4% aggregate ownership, at least where it stands, is pretty appealing. And you kind of just ran over this, but this is another team. When you said that DraftKings kind of mailed in pricing today, you would really think that in a spot like this, they'd be a little bit more expensive. But what's crazier is that, I don't know, does this not feel like a slate on DraftKings that because pricing is so good on some of these really popular teams, that we're ignoring the really good pricing on other really good teams that aren't popular at all, specifically Houston being one of them. Minnesota's getting like 5% aggregate ownership. It feels like a bunch of teams are in that 3 to 5% ownership range with good pricing and just no attention paid towards them at all.
Yeah, it's on one hand, it's keeping the ownership somewhat in check because you have so many teams you can go to. You're not getting like 20% ownership going to the Cubs or the Braves. But with there being so many cheap teams, basically it seems like any of the teams that are like close to normally priced. The Astros are still underpriced, but they're at least not like, you don't look at it and just go like, what the hell were they doing? It's going to keep the ownership even lower on them because optimizers are going to just spit out the teams with $2,500 six hitters before they get to the Astros.
Arizona and the LA Dodgers. By the way, this show is presented by Yahoo.com, or sorry, not Yahoo Mail, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. And they've got the CSVs now. They've got the CSV uploads if you want to play multiple lineups and make that a whole lot easier. Instead of doing like Adam did last year, hand making 100 of them. Much respect to you, man. I can't believe you were doing that.
Most profitable thing I've done in DFS in years.
It's crazy, right? Yeah, it was smart. Like you're going to lose profit the way you were doing things now that this is happening. But yeah, maybe not. But you know what I mean? Like when you took that type of time to do that, it gave you a distinct advantage because not many people were putting that many lineups in.
My Yahoo results went downhill once all the other good players could just click a button and have 150 lineups.
Exactly. Most trusted name in daily fantasy sports. Well, fantasy sports and now daily fantasy sports. Make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Head over there. Make it happen. I think we still have the promo code Awesemo too to get up to $30 in YSRPs. AWESEMO when you sign up. Get ready for football, man, right around the corner. They're going to have some huge NFL contests. Dodgers, Arizona, Walker Buehler, Zach Gallen. Walker Buehler, last start was about 11 days ago, and he punched out 11. He's coming off the injured list, and he's facing a pretty respectable Arizona team, but they've got a 3.4 run implied total, 4.7 for Arizona. I'm sorry, no, is it Alex Young on the mound?
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, okay. I had Zach Gallen earlier, and I forgot to refresh it. I think, yeah, Alex Young on the mound. Okay, just to be clear here. It is, I think so. Okay. Wait, no.
Wait,
no, he pitched yesterday. I think it's Gallen, dude. I think it's Gallen. Yeah, because Young pitched yesterday. Right? Yeah. Zach Gallen. He's last time. Yeah, it's got to be Gallen. It's his spot in the rotation. I was getting conflicted spots here, looking at who was starting, but I believe it's Gallen. So let me see if this has been updated because you might see the totals change here for the Dodgers if that's the case, even though they're just ridiculously good and it probably won't.
And yeah, MLB.com is Gallen versus Buehler.
Has Gallen. Okay. What does Pinnacle have for the total? While I look this up, you can go ahead and start on Walker Buehler, Adam.
He's good. I don't know that I'm. I'm not really concerned about him being limited here. Like he missed one start with a blister issue. He was out. Yeah,
it's been 11 days. I have zero concerns about that whatsoever.
Yeah,
outside of Dave Roberts.
Right. That's the concern. Maybe Dave Roberts just decides he's not fine, but I'm pretty sure he's fine. He's getting 16% ownership compared to 38% for Scherzer. So I think that's the spot that you could look to for sure, just kind of as a pivot, because the upside is just as high for Buehler. I think Scherzer is the better projected play. I think he's more likely to beat Buehler, but 2-1 odds there, or more than that even, is probably a wider range than it should be. I don't love the matchup against Arizona, but I also don't love the matchup against Philly. Like I kind of said before, I think that I'll probably end up just not getting all the way up to Scherzer or Buehler. I think I'll have a lot of lineups with two cheaper pitchers, but I think that Buehler is a solid option, doesn't project as well as Scherzer, but also is going to be a lot lower owned.
Isn't it kind of amazing that Gallen is another guy that Miami got rid of and has just been really good?
Yeah, they just called up Josh Chisholm, who's who they got for Gallen. So he's got some pretty big shoes to fill based on how Gallen is started.
See how it works out. It's crazy. They seem to get rid of everyone. Gallen's served up a decent amount of power, but a lot of good pitchers are going to do that, and they're going to limit it to solo shots. And if you can do that, you're going to be good. He's gone 6+ innings in all but one start. That was his first start, where he probably could have gotten a little bit further into that had he not been limited in pitch count. He's just he's good, but the Dodgers offense is a juggernaut. They're very imposing, and there's not a lot of pitchers that I'm willing to run out there. They've got the second lowest strikeout rate against righties, higher than only the Philadelphia Phillies. They have a 130 WRC plus, that's second in the league, behind only the Padres. 254 isolated slugging percentage, that second in the league, behind only the Padres. And you ready for this? 361 weighted on base average, second in the league. You know who's behind? Only one team.
Orioles?
Padres. They're really good, Adam. Across the board, this team is destructive. And while Pinnacle has the Dodgers at a 4.4 total, that says a lot about how good Gallen is. He's pretty expensive, and I wouldn't exactly say he's been priced down for this matchup.
Yeah, he's basically, I view him basically the same way I view Zach Wheeler, not in terms of what I think of him as pitchers, because Gallen's strikeout stuff obviously has been much better than Wheeler's this year. I think Gallen is really good. We don't have his ownership projection up right now because of the starter change, but I assume that he's going to come in that 2 to 3% range, just because he's in the same pricing range as Scherzer, Buehler, Lamet, Javier. These guys are all going to get a lot more ownership. And so I don't feel good about the spot, but he is a good pitcher. You can not that it's indicative of what's going to happen today, but you can go back and look at the last time he faced the Dodgers. He struck out 9 guys and scored like 23 DraftKings points. Like he clearly has that in his range of outcomes. So if he is 2 or 3% owned, that's probably lower than it should be. But if you're playing like 3 lineups, you're not going to need to get there because you're going to want to go to the higher probability guys. Do
you have any interest in bats?
Not really. I mean, both these pitchers I just think are really good. The Dodgers they're relatively expensive. So, I mean, you could make the argument that they're just going to be low owned and they are the Dodgers. So you're getting tournament winning upside there, but it's not like it's going to be a top 3 stack for me or something.
Okay. Ready to close this one out?
Yep.
San Diego, LA Angels, Dinelson Lamet, Julio Turan. Lamet, along with pretty much everybody on the Padres, has been very solid. 5.7 implied total for the Padres, 3.9 for the Angels at Angel Stadium. I already mentioned that the Padres have annihilated right-handed pitching this season. They lead the league in almost every single category. They've been insanely good. Lamet on the mound is striking batters out at 33%, 38% righties. He's even gotten that K rate up to 30% against lefties, which is pretty encouraging. 14.7% swinging strike rate, second highest on this slate, only behind Max Scherzer. Just pretty spectacular numbers for the young fella, Adam, and sub 4 implied total for the LA Angels today. Now, the Angels are one of those teams that for several years now has not been a high strikeout team. This year, they are still bottom 5 in Ks versus righties. But I guess I'll toss it over to you. Dinelson Lamet at this price. Can we get behind that, or should we be looking elsewhere for the most part?
Yeah, I think you can get behind it. And one of the reasons is why I think it's important to pay attention to who's actually in lineups, because as a team, the Angels do have a low strikeout percentage, but that's in part driven because Anthony Rendon doesn't strike out, Albert Pujols doesn't strike out, and Andrelton Simmons doesn't strike out. You also have Tommy La Stella, who wasn't a high strikeout guy. Now he's on, I don't remember, Oakland or something. But not the Angels being the point. But if you go through individually, like since he came over, but since the start of the 2018 season against right-handed pitching, Shohei Ohtani struck out 27%. Joe Adell has 80 plate appearances against righties so far this year. He struck out 44%. Anthony Bemboom, if he's in the lineup, has a 30% strikeout percentage. They have guys, Justin Upton's at 30%. Trout over the last 3 years is 21%. This year he's at 26%. They have guys, the guys that aren't really low K guys like Rendon and Fletcher and Simmons and Pujols strike out a ton. So it's not like it's one of these lineups where you're just fighting to get every strikeout to get a strikeout from anyone. Like there's a lot of strikeouts to be had. It's just that 3 or 4 guys in the lineup, you're just probably not going to strike out.
What about the bats against Julio Teheran, knowing that the Padres have been as spectacular as they have been offensively? Julio Teheran's allowed 6 home runs over his last 4 starts. He hasn't gotten past 5 innings in any of them. He hasn't struck out more than 3 batters in any of them. The list goes on of indictments against Julio Teheran this season, particularly his 13% K rate and 5.7% swinging strike rate, easily the lowest on this slate. This could be a really tough night for him.
Yeah, it's a really bad spot for him. It's obviously a really good spot for the Padres. The one thing I'll say, though, is I don't really get why the Padres are getting so much ownership. Like, I get that it's a really good spot, but I don't think it's like markedly better than the spot is for Atlanta or, for the Cubs or for some of these other teams. I get it. But also from a full stack perspective, you're probably going to have Eric Hosmer and Mitch Moreland both hitting, 4 or 5 or somewhere in that range. You can only get one of them in your lineup on DraftKings. On FanDuel, obviously, you can get both. But that makes it so, it's the same problem you run into with like teams like the White Sox, where you can't get that full middle of the order stack because of positions. So it's not quite as appealing as some other stacks. Like I think the Padres are one of the highest probability, if not the highest probability team on the slate. But right now, at least, we have them getting a little bit more ownership than I think they should relative to all these other stacks that we like.
Yeah, they're what did you say they're coming in at? It's 14.5%. Yeah, they're getting a lot for sure. Whew. All right, so before we close this one out, who are your top stacks for the day and top pitchers? We still got a ways to go, but
Yeah, right now I would say McKenzie. Man, Javier scares me, but so does Berrios. I think this is a fun tournament slate, actually. But I would say I expect my highest owned pitchers right now to be McKenzie, Berrios, and probably Lamet. As far as stacks go, I like Houston. Seemed like they were coming in a little bit under-owned. I like the White Sox, even though I also like Berrios. I just think the ownership is going to be too low on the White Sox. I like the Braves quite a bit.
Okay, I'll just add this. I'm intrigued by Spencer Turnbull. Got decent enough strikeout stuff coming in with virtually no ownership. Kyle Hendricks isn't a high K guy. Adrian Hauser, it's a good matchup for sure, and much people would prefer him over somebody like Turnbull. But I am intrigued by that. If he stays at like 1 or 2%, it might be a spot that I look to jump on. Anyway, that'll do it for us. Thanks for hanging out with us. As always, we've got plenty of shows coming up throughout the day. If you missed the NBA strategy show with Josh and Greg, check that out. NBA Live Before Lock coming up with Adam and myself. That'll be at 5:30, I think. 5:30, 6:30? Yeah, 5:30. And then what else do we have? We got MLB Live Before Lock. It's a combined stream. EMAC and Greg will take you up till 7:05. Then you got the early bird closing out the day. So we appreciate you as always. Hey, hit that thumbs up before you head out. We got 6 away from 100. We can at least hit that. It's a semi-decent benchmark on a baseball slate this morning. For Adam, myself, we'll see you back here tomorrow on the MLB Strategy Show presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.